Hi, and welcome to our latest podcast episode. I'm Lauren Clark, President and CEO of Bridge C14. Today, I'm joined again by Jeff Corcoran, the founder of Kinwood. For context, I'd like to share with all of you how Jeff and I met. Jeff was actually introduced to me through someone in the MAiD community, and he wanted to help. He approached Bridge C14 with the idea of coming up with a practical guide, a non medical guide, for families who are supporting someone through a MAiD provision. Jeff, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the guide?
Hi, Lauren. Well, the guide is really a non medical guide, and it's not meant for patients or doctors. It's really meant for families and individuals who are supporting a MAiD provision. And the point of view of the guide is really for those family members and the support network of a potential MAiD patient. And how do they how do they think about MAiD, and how can they prepare best for the eventuality? There was a lot of information out there, on the internet with various organizations. And I know, Lauren, after we met, we had a couple conversations about the value of talking to people in a different, more informal way about a lot of the soft issues and atmosphere issues around MAiD. And that was really the basis and the genesis for the guide. So
And certainly, through our Bridge C14 community, it was interesting because as Jeff and I were starting to talk on our end of things, we had actually been putting together this list of top 20 considerations, and we called it feedback from lived experience. And so these were key points that individuals who had experienced a MAiD loss wanted others to know in advance. This advice and feedback on things to consider when planning for MAiD. And so the Bridge C14 community, and particularly the advisory committee members, were instrumental in ensuring that, certainly the language and material reflected in the guide would, reflect that of the greater MAiD community. And so ensuring that the feedback from our members would be woven into the guide was important for us. And I have to say, the team at Kinwood was so supportive in doing just that. And I think the end product really speaks to the idea around how do we provide practical advice to those who are already overwhelmed with all of the other pieces that are going on through the MAiD process. And so this is one way to succinctly sort of put everything together in a document that I'm certainly really proud of. And I know, Jeff, I hope I can speak for you in saying
yeah.
that it's something that really we wanted to be very user friendly. And I think now what we'll do is we'll take some time to sort of cover the guide, provide a walking tour, so to speak. And so, if we look at the beginning of the guide, it really is where to start. And one of those things is around establishing goals. And I think what's really helpful here is when we start to identify goals, including wishes and hopes for the experience, but also those roles for family and friends. How does someone want to experience the day? Who can be that sort of anchor in helping to prioritize what really is important? And identifying someone close to the person choosing MAiD to take the lead on these non medical considerations is really important. This person is, what we've identified as a spokesperson, and they are that lead role. They are the one who helps to guide those conversations, really look at the individual's wishes and, considering their health, the mental and physical capabilities. And I think that's really important too. Not everybody is going to be able to do everything they want to, but I think part of the goal setting is really to be as wide ranging as possible and focus on things that bring that meaning and comfort, right? And that they're achievable, right? And that's where that spokesperson can start to engage with the patient themselves, have those conversations about their most important wishes. Maybe that's driving by an old home or visiting with special people or sharing those stories, as we spoke about in our last podcast episode around creating that legacy and sharing in that history. Think about, how family and friends can also be of support to one another, and how if someone isn't going to be there or involved, how they could be involved in some way. And again,
Yeah.
establishing, who they'd like to see before MAiD, right? Maybe it's preparing something to say goodbye. writing a letter, sending a photo. All of these things can really be instrumental in how that individual, sort of approaches their MAiD death and how everyone around them can best support. And one of the things I certainly want to highlight here is that everyone is different. And some individuals will not want to engage, or they don't do or say the things that you plan for. And we need to be prepared for that. And I think when we think about even establishing the after death plan, sometimes these are things that we don't always consider, but think about, contacting the funeral director for that transportation of the remains, but also how long can you spend with the body, right? Planning for that in advance and, spending that extra time can really help make the death real and allows for people to say goodbye. And so, maybe it's a ritual or having music played, sitting in silence. All of these things should be really thought about in advance, but creating a plan helps to make sure that people are prepared. And I think one of the things that I want to highlight here too is around the involvement of children. And, we see families who are navigating this MAiD journey and thinking about how do I involve children and have conversations. And one of the things here is really there are no age restrictions on who can attend MAiD, but involving children really is that personal parental decision. Children are very resilient, and we want people to be able to talk to children about MAiD in a transparent manner as they would about any other family or health topic.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, that's, when we started working on this guide, the subject of, what do we say about children and MAiD? And I was certainly relieved that, many people in the community had already thought about this. And I think the advice, Lauren, that you give is really, really helpful. And, and it's very clear, and it seems just like the right thing to do. And, generally with these things, the more you communicate, the better it is. If we go to MAiD Day, some of the specific considerations, I mean, there's some very practical things that that if you're not a doctor, that are very important to you as you approach MAiD Day. So even simple things like what to wear. I mean, I think if the patient is able, they can wear whatever they'd like during that day. For family and friends, we recommend that wardrobe should be something like going to dinner or brunch with your loved one. I mean, wearing something, familiar and comfortable will make everybody feel, in terms of, so if you think about the room and how to set it up, there's different things around atmosphere, but one of the things is also around, just what do you have in the room for drinks or any snacks? And the MAiD, the patient lead, the MAiD spokesperson should plan for a light menu, whether it's just Coke or soft drinks or some chocolates or candy or something more elaborate. I think the individual needs to, we need to have water in the room as well, obviously, but whatever is most appropriate and whatever the patient, something symbolic to the patient, I think is a real opportunity in terms of preparation with food. In terms of the room preparation itself, we think this is something that's really important, and it's important to give some thought around into the room in terms of the room setup and how you decorate the room, ornate the room. I mean, some people will choose spiritual or religious items to surround the room. Other people may want a more unique and personal take. Flowers, photographs are all options. But important things to remember are things like music and sound. Do you want music playing in the room when visitors are coming in and out? Do you want important photos or possessions? How do you want the bed set up? And what is the lighting in the so there's all those considerations. I know also, so we're avoiding people with hurt feelings. During the MAiD procedure, where should, assuming that loved ones are present, where should they sit? And I think arranging and deciding some of these factors prior to a MAiD procedure is really important, and the pre-planning will help with any, will mitigate any hurt feelings that may come up. In terms of managing visitors, I think this is something that's really important too. So, if there is if you are in a room, having people come in to the room can often through no fault of their own, they might unintentionally disrupt sort of the mood in the room with small talk or coming in with big highs. We recommend that before somebody comes in the room, that the MAiD spokesperson or the family lead just gives visitors, a 20 or 30-second briefing of who's in the room, what the mood is like in the room, any other, important contextual information that they might need. So all of those things, being prepared for those things, I think would really, sets up the atmosphere in the room and the best way to support the patient and the family. So everybody feels the most comfortable and it prevents any sort of awkwardness going on at the time.
For
Um,
sure. And I think, that's a lot of people talk about that is that, I wish I would have known to think about all these things in advance, right? To think about some of those smaller details that, the food and what to wear, but how important they can be. And really we
yeah.
want to make sure that people are comfortable. It's not an easy day. And so it's the more that you're prepared going into it and kind of understand and have expectations in some ways of what that might look and feel like and who's going to be there and where people are going to be positioned. And I know in a previous podcast, Chelsea Peddle and Alicia Freeborn talked about that as well, and how awkward that can feel when you go in and you're not sure who can be there and where to stand and what to do and what to say, and the acknowledgement that they wish they would have spoken about it sooner, and really, how important that would have been to have that conversation so it would have been more comfortable just on the day of.
Yeah, and I think that's what the guy does a really good job of trying to bring all these issues to the forefront, so you can proactively deal with them, because it's much more easy to deal with them in advance than it is during the time and the range of emotions that people are going through. You know, certainly in the lead up, and then very much in that room, it's not necessarily conducive to having really rational, well thought out reactions to events that happen in the room. So the preparation is really important.
For sure. And I think, as is when we, think about even the medical team, that doctor or nurse practitioner is entering this space with their own energy and mood. And I think sometimes that can unintentionally disrupt the environment, right? And sometimes their
Yeah,
small talk may not be felt in the same way or appreciated in the same way. And that's where that spokesperson having a conversation with the medical team in advance, confirming what time they're going to arrive at as well. Those are things that are really important to establish and have a good sense around, and what that procedure sort of looks like. And, even during MAiD, many people comment that it can be unsettling, right, around the setup and the multiple syringes and how quickly things can happen, right? It's one of those things that takes people aback. And so, what I would say is really prepare for all of the possibilities. And for those who may choose to be alone, that can be also upsetting for those in their support network, and who will be there to support those individuals. Thinking about all of those aspects. And then even after the death, that some describe this experience as being beautiful, and this feeling of presence and that comfort that they can find when they do spend time with the body, and they share in that sort of contemplative silence during that time. And sometimes the spokesperson may want to share a statement or a poem to acknowledge the truth or the spirituality of the moment. And they keep within that sort of that after death plan that was already established, ensuring that guests understand the time they have prior to the transportation of the body, right? All of these things are
yeah.
really important knowledge to have. And I think that's where the guide, even having that in there is something for people to think about and reflect on. And then when we think about the grief and support, and certainly this is where, Bridge C14, what we have established is really when an individual makes that complex end of life choice, they and those around them really can feel isolated and unsupported. And we know that, and they're not sure where they can turn to connect with others who may have that lived experience, and they feel very much alone without that place to voice that grief. They navigate this all by themselves and without that community of support. And so, with Bridge C14, we really have tried to build those meaningful connections of support through all stages, recognizing that individuals have needs at all points along with MAiD, right? And that's where, creating that culture and talking about things is really important, and to establish all of these things, the pre, during, and post MAiD aspects, and being prepared for those. And I think that's really when we look at the guide, certainly that's one of the things that our community members really wanted to have for people who are starting this journey out on sort of that day one, and can pick up this document and say, okay, this is where I need to start, and having it as a guide for them as they move through this journey.
I've been fortunate enough, Lauren, to meet many of your, team members, and, without exception, it's one group of amazing, compassionate individuals, and who really care, and they're really, I mean, they really believe in MAiD, and are, here for, supporting families and individuals as they go through the process. And I just want to compliment just how great your team is. So I certainly encourage anybody to take advantage of all those resources at BC14. The last sort of third of the MAiD guide then covers, soft skills like, how do you celebrate a life, and grieving versus celebrating. And I think, as you look forward to whether it's a celebration of life or a funeral or some sort of commemoration ceremony, it's very hard to sort of pull apart these two things of grief and celebrating. And to grieve a life and to celebrate one are very different endeavors, and they should be approached differently. I mean, grief is often associated with personal and specific emotions of loss, sorrow, sadness. And when trying to articulate grief, the questions you should be asking is, what values did the individual pass along to me? What were the best times I spent with my mom or my dad, for example? What did this person, mean to my children? What were the unique qualities of this person as a parent? What specific things are you thankful for? If you're coming to terms with a loss or preparing to say goodbye, saving the answers to these questions will help you capture your emotions and be a resource for the grieving process. So if capturing grief is largely a personal exercise, celebrating a life is outwardly focused on the identity of that real person with a unique life story. So questions around celebration and celebrating a life should be oriented around the accomplishments and the legacy. How would my dad's best friends describe him? What are my mom's, proudest personal moments? What footprints or accomplishments did they leave in their life? What unique skills did they have? What knowledge did they have? What did they teach others? What made them laugh? Were they funny? I mean, you can come up with an inventory of all these various values and attributes, and as a structure and narrative around a celebration of life. And I think if you go on kinwood.ca, there are various different tools and examples there where you can start to think about, coalescing information around this. And so once you have this information, how do you capture the content? And, we recommend something that's free, and it's as simple as writing it down. And, capturing your thoughts via the written word can be very therapeutic, whether it's a notebook or a computer, or even just writing it down on your phone. Documenting your thoughts through this time really has great value. Now, if you wanted to take some of these thoughts and combine them with photographs, there are all these free presentation and slide builders like PowerPoint or Google Slides or Keynote. And it's a really an easy way to combine photography with written material. And you could do it as an individual. You can get a whole family together and put together photographs and words, and potentially show it to the MAiD patient or save it for a celebration of life later on. But you could show these things on a tablet, or you could even take them to a printer and have them professionally printed. There are other things like video recording that can be a little tricky because it can be on cell phones, and it's difficult sometimes to share some of these files. But I know, in the lead up to MAiD, having the ability to speak with the MAiD patient via video conference or Zoom are wonderful tools that we didn't even have 10 years ago. And I think the ability to interact and connect with the loved ones, there's never been a better time to do this. We also offer Kinwood offers professional help. We produce beautiful family films. We manage and plan celebration of life events and even do oral history projects. So you can visit kinwood.ca to learn more. But really, the overarching motivation for the guide was, I believe, or at least as we talked about it, was to give families a sense of what the day would look like and potentially how to prepare.
Absolutely. And I think those who have already accessed the guide, the feedback has been how helpful it's been just to have a place to go and not feel that they have to retain all of the details when, in those initial conversations they're having, there's a lot of information flowing. And sometimes it's just nice to have, something physical, right? Something to
Yeah.
sort of go back to more than once. And we know that this, navigating MAiD is not linear. And there are so many points along the way that, where there are complexities and dynamics and conversations that are happening. And so it's nice to just be able to kind of sit down and think about some of these things and to, as we say, to better prepare for the day of. And the comments that people say is, I wish I would have known this sooner. And I think that's where, staying at the forefront of this and creating this guide is really going to help to better shape the overall MAiD experience. And I think it's a really important tool.
Yeah, we're really proud of it. I mean, working together on this, Lauren, with your team. Yeah, it's we're really proud of it. So thank you for all your help.
Mm. Well, thank you. And thanks again, Jeff, for joining on our podcast. And as Jeff mentioned, if you'd like to learn more, you can certainly check out kinwood.ca. You can also find the link to the guide on our website. Thank you, everyone. Reach out as needed. You're not alone.